Yeah, I think that does. Of course, bear in mind, if we should ever meet aliens from another planet, and actually I doubt that we ever will, not that they may or may not be out there, but the vast interstellar distances would just make it impossible. In the sci-fi shows, they have to come up with cheats like warp drives and hyperspace and things like that to span the differences. Otherwise, it'd be generations and generations on a ship, and there are issues with generation ships too. But if we would ever meet them, they would be so much different, so much more different than anything we have ever encountered. And in my aliens, of course, I'm going for comedy, but I've got aliens that are feathered and finned and have all kinds of, they're bubble aliens that just float through the atmosphere, and aliens that slide on their belly. And they would be very, very different.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have a great author on the podcast, and a lot of what he writes about ties directly to my heritage and my ancestry, which makes me really curious, and I'm excited to have him on the show. Gary Randolph is on the podcast. He's got many, many books, and if you love aliens, if you love Scotland, if you love anything Celtic, this is the guy you need to get his books and buy all of them, because you're going to be entertained. You're going to have a great smile on your face as you read, but also you're going to get a little taste of history at the same time. It's all wrapped up into one, and I love that, Gary. Welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here and just hang out for a little while and chat with you.
It's great. Tell everybody where you are, Gary, in this big world of ours.
I am in the United States, in Indiana. So that's one of the Midwestern states, and in a medium-sized city called Anderson, which is not too far from Indianapolis.
Beautiful. Now, what is your passion and love for everything Celtic? Because I see a lot of what you write has that leaning. Where does that interest come for you?
It's interesting that started for me as a child. I can still picture the scene going upstairs in my parents' house as a kid into what we called the junk room, which a lot of families have some kind of a junk room where different things are stored. And I came across a black 3-ring binder with mimeograph pages inside that purported to tell the genealogy of my mother's family. Her maiden name was McCart, an Irish name. And this genealogy traced the family back to a legendary high king of Ireland named Cormac MacArt, who lived in the 200s, 300s AD. And even as a kid, I was a little skeptical that they could do that. And as it turns out, he may or may not have actually existed. And from there, the story got kind of sketchy, but jumped to the 20th century to report all the second and third cousins of the family. But that kindled my interest in genealogy and in all things Irish. And when my wife and I got married and couldn't afford real vacations, we visited libraries and courthouses instead and traced the family back. I have a lot of Irish on my mother's side and even more Scottish on my father's side. And then later on, when we got to travel to Ireland and Scotland, we made a point to drive around those ancestral areas where we knew they existed. And so I liked reading about Irish and Scottish history. And for a number of years, I hosted big fall parties at my house when the leaves turned that celebrated Irish and Scottish culture. We'd play Scottish Highland games and eat Irish stew. And we'd have a ceilidh, which is an Irish and a Scottish word that just means a house party with stories and songs and things like that. And that's got me started in storytelling. And then when I had grandkids in grade school, I offered to take those songs and stories to their classrooms for St. Patrick's Day. And then that led into doing other storytelling gigs around. Um, I do some things with growing up on the farm in Indiana, uh, some American history, Irish and Scottish legends and history. And, I don't do too many gigs a year. I focus mainly on my writing, but it's always fun to get out and connect with a group. And when I get a chance to do it, I love to do it and do stories orally as well as in a written form.
Nice. Now, the whole thing about being a storyteller, Gary, when did becoming a storyteller become important to you? Was it when you were younger, more as an adult? Because telling a good story and a connective story with people, with listeners, and through writing, that takes a lot of work to learn how to do that properly. So I'm interested in how you got kind of hooked up with storytelling.
It does take a lot of work to do it properly, because on the one hand, you need to really know the material you want to communicate. You don't want to be standing in front of a group with a lot of ums and stammering around. On the other hand, you can't let it come off totally polished, or you can't let it come off like a video. You have to connect to the audience, and so that's a big challenge. I don't know when it started. I was just thinking about that this morning in for a dedication for my next book. When I started telling stories, maybe let's go back to when my kids were little, and I would read them stories, read the Boxcar Children, read Tom Sawyer, read the Chronicles of Narnia, and the beautiful thing was just watching them visualize the story as I read it. And so I would then also tell them stories about growing up or history or whatever things that was. So I've probably been telling stories all my adult life.
Is there anything specific that you do as you write to make sure that you are telling a story that puts people in the place where they can put themselves into the story and they feel like they're a part of what you're saying? As you mentioned for the kids, they felt like they were part of it. Is there any approaches you have to that? Because I have authors that are writing right now, listening to the podcast. Mm-hmm. They want to write a good story, but they're not really sure some of the elements of a good story from an author's perspective. Is there anything you can give us for some advice?
Well, probably the biggest key to bringing someone into a story are the sensory details. And I tend to write in layers, and the first draft is just getting the story out, getting the plot down. And if I think of some characterization and sensory details, then I'll put those in. But then it's in the second and third drafts where I go through it and I look for that. What is the character seeing? What is the character smelling and hearing? Are the footsteps echoing across concrete in a warehouse? Is there a smell of something cooking somewhere that brings them in? That brings in people. The other thing that, of course, brings in people are honest, realistic characters and dialogue. And to do that, you need to know the characters very well. And a lot of people, will do a lot of things to get to know the characters well. They'll write backstories for them. I've heard authors say that they interview their characters, and ask their characters questions and have their answers just as a way of getting to know them. I don't do that, but I do try to get to know them very well. And when that happens, then the characters help you write the story. They'll tell you what they're going to say next and what they're going to do next. And again, also, I write more comedic fiction, and there's no better comedy than character-driven comedy. Because when you have defined a character and your reader knows what that character is like, then when the character tells you, okay, this is what I'm going to say, and I write down that's what they say, and the reader comes along and say, of course, that's what they would say. Mm-hmm. And that just drives it all home. So that makes it, again, a comedy that makes it feel better. That makes it funnier. But in terms of just realistic storytelling, that's what has the ring of truth to it.
A big thing in comedy is timing, too. When you see somebody up on stage and they're doing their skit, they're doing a thing, a lot of it's just around timing, pauses and callbacks and things that make you go, oh, like you're on a journey with this comedian. How do you do that in a written form? How do you do timing? I'm really interested about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's tricky. I tend to write with a lot of em dashes and ellipses, and maybe too much. Certainly, if I was writing a script, I wouldn't put that in because you would leave that to the actor's interpretation. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to communicate not just what the character is saying, but also what the character is thinking, what the character is not saying. And so any tricks you can use with that does help. In terms of timing, you can also, there's the timing you were talking about acting a comedic part, but there's also timing in terms of taking the reader through the story. And sometimes you can put in just a bit of stage business that just takes the reader just a beat to read through that. Yeah. And then you go on to what you wanted to say. And that works well.
That's a muscle that takes time to develop too. That's not something you're going to get possibly right out of the gate. Again, mm-hmm. Comedians will write up a new set. They'll go and practice at some little comedy bar before they do it in the big time. You got to work that material. It can't just be, they're going to tweak it all the time and make it better and tighter and, and kind of make it the best experience possible. So I think as authors and as content creators, you have to kind of give yourselves the space to kind of work with that content a little bit more, not just, mm-hmm. It's not like one and done, I don't think, from an author's perspective.
Those kinds of things also are good at building tension in stories. Read anything by Dean Koontz, and he'll have this scene, this big climatic fight scene, and just in the middle of it, he'll do an aside, of of maybe the history of something, or maybe what the person is thinking, or just some little thing that he's noticing. And it could take a few seconds or it could take a few minutes to read through that. But all this time you're saying, what's happening next? Yeah. And he's messing with you. He's building up that tension.
It's like taking the finish line and moving it a few feet away. You think you're almost there, and then, oh, wait, now it's over there, and I'm still mm-hmm. chasing the finish line. I like that. That's really good. You also have done some trips over to Scotland, Ireland area. And what does it feel like to be writing about that and then to be standing there? I see photos on your website of you over there. That's amazing. What does it feel like to be in the space that you write about? Does that give you more context? Does it inspire you to keep writing more?
Well, now I have one book that's stories of Ireland and Scotland. Yep. Most of my other books are set in outer space. Although I do have in one of my Pelham and Blanding's books a character who speaks with a Scottish accent, and of course Pelham and Blanding's are based on P.G. Wodehouse's characters, Jeeves and Wooster. So this whole alien society is somewhat British, and so I wanted to put in a Scottish character. Now he's not like any Scot I actually met. He's probably closer to groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons. But uh, I did try to use some Scots words. Um, I think traveling in Ireland and Scotland, and I've been to a few other places around the world. I've been to New Zealand, I've been to Africa, been to Italy years ago. But uh, I think that feeds into some of my approach to aliens also, because you'll come up with what is a very different culture, but you find that people are people wherever you go, and they have the same kinds of things. And you may have a lot of obstructions to communicating with them. I remember one time when we were in Scotland, and we were in Glasgow, and the Glasgow accent, or as they say, the Glaswegian accent, is probably one of the hardest to understand. And as we were traveling around Scotland, I would probably understand about 80% of what was said to me. Then we got to Glasgow and it dropped about 40%. But so we were going to take a train, and we got our ticket, and I went up into all the platforms, and there was a guard there, and I asked him where I could catch this train, and he started off on 2 or 3 sentences that I couldn't make heads or tails out of what he said, and but he ended with platform 9, and I could see the sign for platform 9 right behind him. So I said, "Thank you very much," and moved on. So my Earth characters out in outer space have kind of similar situations where they're on their back foot a lot, but then they find a connection.
Mm-hmm. Do you think being a traveler helps you to write in that context? Because you're kind of an alien in that place, right? When
Right.
you're standing there on that train, station going, I don't understand anything that's going on. I just need this information. Does it give you some kind of connection with the aliens that you write about in your books, that you felt that feeling yourself, traveling and being in a very unfamiliar place?
Yeah, I think that does. Of course, bear in mind, if we should ever meet aliens from another planet, and actually I doubt that we ever will, not that they may or may not be out there, but the vast interstellar distances would just make it impossible. In the sci-fi shows, they have to come up with cheats like warp drives and hyperspace and things like that to span the differences. Otherwise, it'd be generations and generations on a ship. And there are issues with generation ships too. But if we would ever meet them, they would be so much different, so much more different than anything we have ever encountered. And in my aliens, of course, I'm going for comedy, but I've got aliens that are feathered and finned and have all kinds of, they're bubble aliens that just float through the atmosphere, and aliens that slide on their belly. And they would be very, very different.
So for your when you create your characters for your Alien series of your books, I'm interested in how you come up with a character development for them. Like you can create any type of character you want. There's really no rules there. Your imagination's your guide for that. So what is your kind of parameters for creating your alien characters for your novels?
Right. Yeah, and in the Star Trek universe, they had a lot of aliens, and they were mainly with different noses and bumps on their head and stuff like that, because they had to work within the constraints of makeup, first in the 1960s and then in the 90s. and in the Star Wars universe, they got a little wilder, but that was again a lot of prosthetics. In a book, uh, you can do anything you want to, as long as there's a way to communicate. Now, in my situations, again, I write more comedic sci-fi. So when I create someone, um, I want it to be someone that will who their differences will make things funny. One of my main aliens in my Galactic Detective Agency series is a lizard person, and so well, we refer to her sharp teeth and her yellow eyes, and she has a little bit of a surly personality. Um, Actually, I modeled her to some extent on the character in Brooklyn Nine-Nine of Rosa Diaz, who's just very, you know, rough and straightforward and deadpan. Um, I go for other kinds of comedic characters. I base one character on Groucho Marx. Of course, in my Pelham and Blandings series, as I mentioned, that's based on the Jeeves and Wooster characters from P.G. Wodehouse. I have in the Galactic Detective Agency series, two other members of the detective team are little yellow birds. Actually, don't call them little yellow birds because they don't like to be called birds at all. But they're an alien species called Avanians. And for their voice, I use kind of like, New Jersey wise guys. But they don't like you messing with them.
Yeah.
And they're a little rough. And even though they're very small, boy, if they come after you with talons and beaks, you're going to know it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just try to mix things up. I'm on the book I'm working on now, which is Galactic Detective Agency, and they are in a diner out on a dwarf planet. And the two aliens who work in the diner, who are what we would call little green men, they speak with kind of a Minnesotan accent, So, oh, you butt, that's, that, what you may be familiar with in Ontario.
Yeah. I love it. I love how you're pulling from all these different sources for inspiration, right? That could put all those people in one room. There's really no connection with all these people. I love that. You're just Groucho Marx, and it's just great. And a bunch of New York guys, hey, we're walking here, like that kind of thing. I love that. That's really kind of cool.
Right. Yeah, that's when you can have a scene with three or four of them together, just all coming from their own perspective. That can be challenging to write, but it can be an awful lot of fun.
Love it. So let's talk about your newest book that's out and you're working on and all that. Tell everybody about that and what can the readers find? Maybe is this a good book to start with, or should we be reading something before this? Are they standalones? I'm really curious about your newest project.
Yeah, the new book is called The Code of the Totleys. It's the third book in the series of Pelham and Blandings, space aliens, or Jeeves and Wooster reimagined as space aliens. Because of that, there's not because of it being based on Jeeves and Wooster, there's not an overarching character arc or plot arc that's going on in the book. So you could start at that one. The other two books in the series, the first one is called Viva Lost Vogus, which is an alien planet that they've set up a casino and a situation that's reminiscent of Las Vegas. I find that out in these alien worlds, they have a certain fascination with Earth culture, possibly because Earth is quarantined from the rest of the galaxy, which is why we don't know about all these space aliens. they don't want us rubbing off on them. But that makes Earth kind of a forbidden planet, and so they're interested in that. So this one planet is set up very much based on Las Vegas. The second book in the series is called The Importance of Being Pelham. The title, of course, comes from Oscar Wilde's classic Importance of Being Earnest, which is a play about false identities, and that plays into a lot in that book. And then this third book, the new one that I just released this week, is called the Code of the Totlings. I think there was a Jeeves and Wooster book called the Code of the Woosters, and Bertie Wooster was always talking about what it meant to be a Wooster, and then the code that they had to follow. And then in this case, my protagonist, Pelham G. Tottley, he has a code that he will help anyone in need, and he finds a little creature who is in need, and he tries to help this creature get back to its home planet and its mate, and has a lot of problems along the way.
I see some comments and reviews on your website about this book, and there's a mention of a leg lamp. Can you fill us in on this?
Again, these alien worlds tend to be fascinated with Earth culture, and one of them is one of the characters in the book is trying to obtain a leg lamp that has gotten transported off Earth. The galaxy, the rest of the galaxy, has contracted with the Greys. You're familiar with Grey aliens. Greys monitor is it's some sort of a religious artifact because it's associated with a certain Earth holiday, and people put it in their windows, presumably to light the way for pilgrims passing by. So Pelham's not so sure about that because it kind of the leg lamp kind of stirs feelings in him that he doesn't quite associate with religious fervor.
I love it. Well, that movie with the leg lamp was actually filmed in my city where I live, about 5 minutes from my house. And so, yeah, that's like that's a really important movie for us here in my city. And in that movie, too, they have the whole thing where his tongue was stuck to the pole. And the movie was filmed in the summer, not even in the winter. So they stuck a vacuum up the pipe,
right?
Sucked his tongue to the pipe. So nobody was harmed in the filming of that movie. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. I drive by there every day and I can see all the scenes in one spot. It's amazing. So I love the leg lamp. You got me with that. So I love that.
There you go.
That's great.
Well, that's the book with the leg lamp.
That's good. What does it mean for you to hear back from your readers, Gary? What does that feel like as an author to have these comments and reviews, things they love, encouragement for you as an author? How important is that for you? I want others listening to leave great reviews for our authors. I want them to hear what it means to you to hear those reviews.
Yeah, that's more important than the money. The money isn't fantastic, but I'm essentially retired and I don't have to do things for money anymore. And so writing is what I want to do. It's something I've wanted to do since I was a kid. And I had opportunities to do it earlier in my career and turned away from it so I could make more money doing other things. Of course, I've always been writing something. We had a software company, and I wrote the computer manuals for that. I was a professor for several years, and I had to write academic papers, and I contributed into textbooks. I wrote drama, church drama plays with a writing partner for a while from Canada, from New Brunswick, who had relocated to Indiana. And, and of course, writing stories for telling and writing these books, and getting this feedback, whether it's a review or someone sends me an email or whatever. that's just like doing storytelling and you see someone's face light up in the audience.
Right.
That's the real reward.
Yeah, I love the one line you have on your website. I smiled all the way through it. That's a good line.
Great.
That's great, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good feeling. I love that. So Gary, as far as connecting with you, I know I have your website up here in front of us. Tell us about your website. Everything's here on your site for all your books, and maybe where you're most active on social media so that we can connect with you as a listener.
Right. My website is sort of the hub that will lead you to everything else. So that is GR Storyteller, GR like Gary Randolph, storyteller.com. And there, if you're interested in the storytelling, there's lists of my programs. There are videos of me singing some songs and in at least one case doing a poem. For the writing, it's got links to all my books and descriptions of all the books. I also have a blog. I don't have a lot of blog entries. I'll only write one maybe every 6 months or so. But I have one tied to the new book, The Code of the Toddleys. I put chapter titles in. That's, author doesn't have to do chapter titles. But since it's a comedic book, that's another place to sneak in a joke or two. And I have a lot of cultural references in the titles. And so I wrote a blog about of the 30-some chapter titles in the book. There's 20-some that have some sort of Easter egg joke in them. And so I wrote a blog just detailing that.
I love those Easter eggs. And I love the look of satisfaction on an author's face when they know they've hidden something for their audience. I can't wait. What chapter are you on? I'm on chapter 2. Oh, wait till you get to chapter 4. Because in chapter 4, we're going to take a left turn when you thought we're going to go right. We're going to go left, and I can't wait to see your face. So I love those little hidden things that people put in just to see if everyone catches it. It's smart. I love it. Everyone, definitely go over and check out Gary's website. We'll have links in the show notes for this. And as well, Gary, the one thing I noticed, you have videos, and I see you with your guitar, which makes me happy as a guitar player. So there's a lot of videos we can catch you playing and singing and doing your thing in front of an audience. And I love that the fact that you're bringing storytelling back into the community, because that feeling of getting together and hearing a good story, that brings us all together. And I think we need more of that in our life. So is there a video or something that we should focus on your website that you would send us to first?
Oh, I don't know. Not necessarily.
There's a lot of good ones here.
And I'm an adequate guitar player, an adequate singer, but it works well in the context of a storytelling performance to do a story and do a song, do a poem, do a joke or two, and then cycle through all those. So it's always something different as we go through the performance.
I love it. Everyone, all the information for Gary will be in the show notes as always. Go over and leave a great review when you buy Gary's books. Especially check out the newest one. Make sure you give it a good look. And maybe there's someone in your life that would also like a copy. Buy one for them as well and send it to them so they have a copy of Gary's most recent book. Gary, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, great.
Hey, thanks for listening to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad you stayed all the way to the end. You're my new bestie. And the one thing I like to do with my besties is enjoy time together over a cup of coffee. Now, one thing missing in the equation is my coffee cup is empty. And what I would love if, after 390 plus episodes roughly, if you found any value in the podcast and you want to say, hey, Dave, do you need a refill of your coffee cup? I'm looking at it right now, and you know what? It's looking kind of sad. There's not much in the coffee cup. If you want to help support the podcast, I would love you forever as besties and celebrate coffee with you. You can celebrate and support the show at our website using our Buy Me a Coffee link. And all the money goes back into the podcast. And we also like to give it to other podcasters. So if you want to support the show, head over to livingthenextchapter.com and let's top it up. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.